Welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and this podcast, it exists for you. Whether you're a music lover, an educator, a choir member, each week we bring guests to the show to help explore what matters in music. I'm so glad that you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello, and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Emily Williams Burch, and I am joined by co-host Alex Gartner, co-author too. Yeah! Hey, this is our third of 3 installments of our pre-release book tour, Who's Opening Each of the Sections thing.
Yes. So our last section of our book, our first one was talking all about building or discovering and defining your value as a choral organization. The second one is about finding your people, building your team and your environment and your culture. And this last section is all about the numbers, sort of that non-musical element of every type of choral musical arts organization that's super necessary. And there's a way to make that more a part of your organization that helps tell your story and help you grow. And so we are joined on this episode and in this section by Dehoney. She is the CEO of Chorus America, which is a Washington, D.C. based professional organization that primarily serves nonprofit choral organizations, though it has a really storied past of serving and continues to serve so many different types of choral organizations in the United States and even in Canada. Chorus America is more of a niche organization. I would say a lot of us are familiar with the American Choral Directors Association and NAFME and all those fun groups. But Chorus America is one of the very few organizations that specifically focuses on the business side of running a choral organization, which is one of the many prefaces of our book. So we're so excited to talk to Catherine.
In this episode, you'll learn all about who is Chorus America, what is Chorus America, how can you get involved, but then we really dig in and talk to Catherine, who has a rich history of not just singing in choirs, but also a heart and a passion for fundraising. Let's just let that sit there for a second. And she uses that passion and her role as CEO to really give us some ideas. You're going to walk away with this one with some really great ideas. And then I can't wait to see how we turn this into a section in the book. Anyway, without further ado, we present to you Catherine Dehoney and Letting the Numbers Tell the Story.
Hello and welcome to the Music Ed Matters podcast. I am your guest host, Alex Gartner. Don't you worry, y'all. Emmy is still with me, and we are joined here by Catherine Dehoney, the CEO of Chorus America. Hi, Catherine. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
We are so thrilled that you are here so we can learn a little bit more about Chorus America, of course. But first, before we get into that and sort of the focus of our conversation, why don't we learn a little bit about Catherine?
Okay. Where do you want to start? Oh my goodness. Well, I assume it's mostly as related to Chorus America, but I have been a singer my whole life. One of those, I always tell people this, that I am one of those classic people who started singing as a toddler and embarrassed her parents singing in church in the cherub choir, singing the loudest and knocking other children off the stairs. But so I grew up singing in church choirs and school choruses, my whole, all the way through education, all the way through college. I was a vocal performance major and then decided to go into arts administration. And I got into the development side of the arts at first, mainly because I like to write. And I was a pretty good proposal writer. So I got hired by the League of American Orchestras to be basically their development writer at first. And then I just kind of grew into other development jobs there. And then took a leave of the arts for a bit and went over to Gallaudet University, which is a university for the deaf and hard of hearing here in Washington, D.C., and raised money for them for a while, and then came to Chorus America as the director of development back in 2000. And except for a couple of hiccups where I left and came back a few times, I have been working with Chorus America since then. at any rate. And so I guess that's probably the important thing. I've been in this role as CEO for about, since 2015. So what is that, 6 years? A little more than 6 years. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And so I know Emmy's audience is very diverse. She's got a lot of different types of music related people who listen. So could you tell us a little bit about what Chorus America is, who it serves, and sort of what your main pushes are as an organization?
Absolutely. So Chorus America is the professional education, research, and advocacy organization for choruses in North America. We have about 7,000 members we serve right now, and that's individuals who have different roles in the choral field, as well as music businesses, and other, composers, conductors, board members, administrators, volunteers, singers, you name it. We were founded about 44 years ago, and originally founded based around as an organization, as the Association of Professional Vocal Ensembles, and that focused on groups that paid their singers. And it grew over time to include pretty much independent 501c3 type choruses of all types, children and youth, large community volunteer choruses, symphonic choruses, and then, of course, professional. And now, in more recent decades, special interest choirs, the justice choirs, for example, choruses serving older adults, particularly those with disabilities, Alzheimer's, dementia organizations. So so we do it all, and of all budget sizes, from less than $50,000 of a budget, maybe $25,000 budgets, all the way up to the largest budget choruses in the country, which right now is about probably 7 million, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hashtag goals.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. So for those of you who are listening, have been following along on our little book tour, Catherine is here. We have asked her to sort of highlight the beginning of our last section of our book, which is, well, the book sort of walks you through about defining your value and building the people around you. And this last one is really about kind of proving your point, walking the walk in a way. And one of the ways, Catherine, that I always refer to this document, I think I look at this maybe once a month, but Chorus America's Choral Impact Study is one of the most valuable tools that is provided to our field. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Absolutely. So it's so interesting. This has been so important to Chorus America, and we've been thrilled for how the field has used it. The Chorus Impact Study originated in the early 2000s. The first one was 2002, 2003 was the publication. And it was groundbreaking in that it was the very first time anybody had tried to, first of all, quantify the field. How many independent choruses are there out there? How many choruses, period? And I'm using chorus interchangeably with choir, singing ensemble, organized singing ensembles. And more importantly, why it matters. And as a dyed-in-the-wool fundraiser, I marched into Ann Meyer Baker's office one day and said, I don't know how to explain to potential funders why what we do matters, because there is no data. Nobody seems to know where the choral world fits in the larger firmament of the cultural life of this country. And lucky for us, Robert Putnam had started, Robert Putnam, the Harvard education researcher, wrote a book called Bowling Alone, where he actually called out choruses as a tool that bolstered democracy. And he used examples where this had been true. A city that's over in Italy where everybody sang, had a much stronger civic life, and commitment to government and law and strong community than other communities. So we took that and ran with it. And what that means is that we asked questions about what are the characteristics of choral singers? How did they see choruses, singing in a chorus, as related to how is it related to their tendency towards being social, to being good citizens? What kind of benefits did they derive? Did they report that they would derive from singing in a chorus? And to do this, we used survey questions from known research surveys in certain areas on social capital, on emotional and physical well-being, actually in the most recent iteration of the chorus impact study that we released in 2019, we used a measure. We took a hard look at singing for the benefits for older adults. So we used survey questions and gauges of emotional, mental, and physical health for older adults. And the result of that first study was so important because it showed that a huge percentage of the population sing regularly in a group every week. And that percentage has shifted over time, but the most recent study showed 17% of children and adults sing regularly in an organized group. That makes it one of the most popular forms of public participation in the arts.
Yeah.
Set that aside. And then the other thing that these studies have shown, now that we've released 3 of them, about every 10 years we've done it, it shows that choruses it put it in the broader context of society, in that it takes it out of a niche activity, and it shows how choruses and choral singers tend to be really good for communities. It showed that choral singers, as compared to general public, have much stronger characteristics of good citizenship and social capital, contributing to social capital for communities, which is essential for their health and well-being. And things like voting more often, giving philanthropic dollars, giving more often, giving larger gifts, volunteering their time, in some cases for the chorus, but outside of the chorus for civic and social organizations in their communities, and holding leadership positions in those organizations. All these wonderful characteristics. So supporting a chorus isn't just about the incredible, beautiful music and how it speaks to you like no other art form possibly could. It's also that you would want to support a chorus because it's good. Whether you like choral music or not, it's good for the community. So, and then the other thing I'll say is that over time, we've taken a hard look at the benefits for children and youth in school, singing in choruses. That was in the 2009 study. And then, as I said, this one for the benefits for older adults, for healthy aging, for creative aging. And in each case, it's shown, important benefits. So lifelong benefits for singing in a chorus. So with all that data, choruses can make their case for why they matter above and beyond the sort of intrinsic value of participation in the arts. Do you know what I mean? It's arts for art's sake. We wish it could be that simple for those of us who were singing since, the age of 2, but it really isn't. That's not why people support choruses necessarily, especially if you're going out to public support.
You literally gave me goosebumps when I just grinned like crazy, because what you just said is basically the whole premise of our first chapter.
Oh, you're singing my song.
No. What you said it earlier. part of the role that we have to do as people who are trying to make the case for choir is ask the question, where does choir fall within the cultural firmament of our country? I love that image. I think it is so incredible. And we just talked about the chorus impact study and how important it is. And I know a lot of the listeners here are active teachers of music, who this type of data might be something that they hear about and we just sort of intrinsically understand, like you've said. But what do you have to say to those people making the case for, actually taking that course impact studies here at this big scale? What's the importance of doing data, even at the small scale within our own groups? What's the value of that?
Well, it sort of gets back to what I said, and I see things so much through a fundraising lens, for good or for ill. And this is where this is how I learned in my profession how to make a case for support. And you've got to think of it from the perspective of the audience, from the donor, right? Mm-hmm. And I used to say choral music has to have a lot of facets to it. You have to be able to show different facets of the diamond, depending on who you're talking to. And it certainly is important for community choruses to think that way. And what I've noticed is the ones that are super successful are able to position what they do in a larger context. And so data is key to that, because you can't just say, well, we know that children and youth have stronger verbal skills or stronger social skills and emotional intelligence because of singing in a chorus, right? You would need data to back that up because you're a choral director. So I use this slide all the time in my presentations. The famous business guru, William Edwards Deming. I guess I shouldn't say guru anymore. That's kind of rude. But expert, William Edwards Deming. In God we trust, all others bring data. And it really gets, you trust so much in the music, you think that's going to be enough. And it just isn't. Most of the time, you really need to have something to fall back on to show how you relate. So, for example, in a school, I can understand that music educators, under the auspices of schools or colleges, may not have thought that this was important. And now are finding, oh my gosh, we have to make a case for our time in the day. We have, preserving the choral time. We have to, for taking tours again, for whatever we're going to be doing, for building the program. And, why? You would need to know who has participated in your program in the past. What else are they involved in? Oh, I have 4 members of the student government in my chorus. That would be nice to know. I have 10 members of the honor society. I have people who are artists, whatever it is you're trying to show. But you've got to ask those questions, right? And then being able to show also that people, for our study, for example, asked a question that linked how long someone has been singing in a chorus to these other emotional and social characteristics. And the longer you have sung with choruses, the more likely you are to have these other characteristics and the stronger they are. So being able to talk about lifelong benefit, and it starts now, because by the time they're 65, they will be uber citizens if we start them now. And contributing in all sorts of ways is a really great thing to be able to say, but right. Go ahead, Emily.
I just love the long game you're talking about. I'm so sorry for interrupting. I'm just so inspired by the long game. And I think what you said earlier, so many, especially students that are pursuing professions in music education, trust in the music. And the music is why we exist. But you're so right in other things. In this section of the book, we're talking about marketing strategies and measuring impact and understanding numbers. And you've given us some stories that we can talk about using the numbers, using the impact. what do you do with marketing? What would you recommend someone who's coming from an admin side, someone who has seen a bunch of different organizations? Once we learn how to kind of tell the story and justify it, how do we actually get that out there?
Right. It's a really important, it's an important aspect of this. And I'm not as, I can't speak so much to music educators in schools, how they may be thinking about marketing, but I certainly think I think I can safely say for anybody, it would be about showing this important community bonding that happens, the collaborative nature of choruses, the way choruses can bolster other things in a community, and showing that, and partnering with organizations that have absolutely nothing to do with singing, because you've got this likely ready group of volunteers who would partner in some other way with a food bank, with a food drive, with a drive for the Afghan refugees, or whatever it is that your community would leverage. Hey, look, there's a chorus out there doing that. It's using some of this data, you can figure out where your chorus should show up to kind of emphasize some of these really important characteristics. Chorus America is about to launch a social media campaign in a couple weeks, that is called Rediscover Harmony. And it is going to do this kind of thing because we are trying to help choruses. We know choruses have kind of a heavy lift coming back after the pandemic, especially given the messaging around singing and viral spread and all that. It's a heavier lift than maybe other performing art forms are going to have. So we're doing this North American social media campaign that any chorus can take advantage of and use for their own purposes, including school choirs. But it's that kind of messaging. It's like, come back to harmony, come back to togetherness. We've all been isolated for too long. And I think that works at any level of choral music,
You said so many things there. You're like, I don't do marketing, but look at what you've said. It's planned, like it's coming in a couple weeks. So obviously you guys have been talking about it as a team. Yes. There is a strategy for what the goal is of the marketing plan, and where it's releasing, that there's going to be some type of inspirational something that people can rally behind and use as well. So right there, you've given us an example with a perfect blueprint that we can then borrow to tell our story. We need help as a choral organization to grow. And so you're using social media as an organization. We can do the same in a smaller setup of our choirs and organizations.
Absolutely. Hey, and use this to launch, because it's going to have imagery and a website that anybody can plug into.
I bet Emmy will put that in the podcast.
Oh, you better believe it. I'm over here thinking, if there are educators listening that have thought, Chorus America doesn't have anything for me, I hope that they are like, wait a second, there is so much to learn here. I know when I watched the first, the Choral Impact Study, I think in 2016, they did a big presentation on it at the next Chorus America conference. I think I took 5 million pages of notes. Just all these things I wanted. I had donors I wanted to talk to and admins that I wanted to see, like whoever did the presentation brought the numbers to life in how they talked about why they were important. And you've said that time and again. It's about how you tell the story and who you're telling the story to and what pieces they need to know. And you can enhance that and push it forward with social media.
Right. And, I think parents know that their kids who are involved in choral singing, that it's pretty special. It's their team, and I have a lens on this because I was not a sports kid, but I was, first string of the chorus.
I can relate.
Right. So, but I think these other benefits to talk about are really important. And so, yeah, I don't think any chorus should be ashamed of, to be hesitant, not ashamed, but hesitant to dive in there and talk about these larger reasons that singing in a chorus beyond touching souls like you do with choral singing. And the other thing is to also, I would say, is that chorus maybe undersell the accessibility for the singers themselves, for participation, for the audiences. We've got words, people. Right?
We have lyrics.
We've got lyrics that mean something, and different ways of interpretation that let the audience participate in thinking about it. And but especially for the benefits for the singers themselves, especially youth, it's a very accessible thing. You bring your instrument with you, and it's important to talk about that as well.
So you've kind of touched on it a little bit, and this might be an uncomfortable question, but I feel as a choir person, when we're trusting too much in the music, we kind of fall back on some buzzwords. Are there any like choral buzzwords that you might want to heed a little warning of that might mean diddly squat outside of the choir or music circles?
Right. That's, it's I'm so glad you asked us this question. And because you don't realize this, you think you're asking me, but I saw that question coming and I sent it to the team. And I was like, guys, what would you say? And wow, did you stump the band? Because we are so steeped in the language ourselves. But a couple things that have buzzed up, but that bubbled up. I'm thinking buzzwords and bubbled at the same time.
I like both of those words. We're good.
Yeah, it's buzzled up. One of the things, and I think I know ACDA has been talking about this a lot too, artistic excellence in itself is a tough word. Artistic excellence is a word that it needs to be tied to a very clear definition of what's the goal, because what it means to some folks is so different than what it means to other folks. And has been used in a way that has been inherently exclusive since and now it's coming about that it's more about maybe artistic achievement, or it's about excellence in this way, in the presentation of this music, and we're calling it excellent because we did our homework and due diligence, and we understand what we're singing about, and we've connected with the artist who wrote this music. And do you know what I mean? So that is a term that I know the staff is like, yikes, every time we hear it. The other word that came up for us was maestro or maestra. It can be a wonderful kind of term of respect, but it has strong connotations of the chorus director, the choir director as the expert artistic genius, and less of a collaborator, and less of somebody who is working, leading from behind to get the best out of people. But it's not never use it. It's just more like how it's being used sometimes. The one that bugs me is canon, the choral canon. That one I'm like, oh, because it is also has been used to talk about a certain body of work. And that has been inherently exclusive of artists of color, of composers of color, and different musical traditions from around the world. I don't know that it should never be used, but it needs to be pretty clear what we're talking about there. And for a while longer, it's going to have to be explicit what you're talking about. Someday it won't be again, maybe, because we'll all know we're just talking about, choral music that has been recognized as being some standard, but right now that's not what it is. So those things came up.
Those are good ones. And you did it again. You gave us a blueprint that we can replicate. You're doing these blueprints that are amazing. So here's the blueprint. If it's a word that needs a very clear definition, if there is not already a working, generally understood in and outside of music circles, if there's not an understanding of what that word means, if it's educationese, if it's musicese, don't use it or change how you're using it or find a way to clearly define it.
Right, exactly. And as I said, I'm sure ACDA has been talking about that as well. So yeah, it's important now. It's all so important to be talking about that and and that everybody's included in that excellence. Everybody can be excellent. With these definitions, everybody can. So
can I tie this into something else just to loop back to the whole marketing thing? So you're talking about clearly defining what these words mean and choosing words carefully and correctly and inclusively. What's the name of this campaign that's about to release on social media?
Rediscover Harmony.
Rediscover. And is everything around that little buzz phrase?
Yes, that's going to be the buzz phrase. And it's the opening of, it includes a short video and some of the social media text that we're providing for folks to use that they can cut and paste and make their own. Talks about that we've been isolated. We've been headed towards isolation long before COVID, and that it is time to rediscover harmony.
I knew it was coming. You knew
it's coming. You could have written it, Emmy.
No, that was so good. I love the buzzwords.
So it's that concept, and it will have a very short video component. That the idea is that we're going from a single person to multiple people singing. You see more and more people getting together and more people singing and that kind of thing, and children and youth. And it has, the coolest thing is it has a tool on this website called the Harmonizer. And we got 37 choristers of all ages, professional, amateur, children, youth, you name it, to sing a note, 37 notes. And they made videos of themselves, it's the postage stamp videos of them. And so think of this enormous, large virtual choir, but you can pick your chord and you can put a series of chords together and record people singing with you if you want.
That's so cool. I'm totally stealing that for a project. So you have something that draws people in, that's engaging. None of those words, rediscover and harmony, both of those are very commonly used words and really easily to define. Is there an infographic? Did you get a professional designer? Is there a certain color associated with the whole?
We did. We used a design firm, a social media firm to help us with this. And it actually, part of the reason this project is so cool is that we have a cohort within Chorus America of the largest budget choruses, because they tend to have the most paid staff and maybe the most sophisticated business operations, because we're talking about multi-million-dollar choruses, obviously. And they decided in a meeting that they wanted to work together to make this possible. They're the ones that came up with this idea. And Chorus America said, okay, we'll help staff it and we can do, we'll help make this go. And they funded it. So what they did was, the idea is that any chorus of any size can use pieces of this for themselves. And it really was designed to speak to everybody, right? And not go diving into politics so much, but I don't think anybody would argue that we haven't all the country's pretty divided right now. But the most important thing for us is to remind folks why choruses combat that division, right? It's so, and church choirs are welcome in it, and everybody who could use some booster for their singing.
I'm so glad we've spent some time talking about that Rediscover Harmony campaign.
I didn't mean for this to be a commercial for that.
No, this is so cool.
I'm
this
so
is
glad.
Spot on. It's a great, again, a blueprint. How can
Yeah.
we recreate that if someone's trying to, if they need to inspire people? That's another idea of how to do it.
Right.
What you a premise behind that, it sounds like, is of course, that act of getting back together and singing, but redefining what that means for one another. And I know in this sort of emergent COVID world that we are living in, choirs are looking to expand, this way. We want to get our numbers back to where they were. We want to grow in different and special ways. But I also feel like a lot of groups are trying to rediscover or reimagine what choirs look like this way, not necessarily in the number, but
this way. He's expanding his hands horizontally, if you are listening.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, podcast.
So what advice would you give to a choir, whether it be in a school, community setting, church, whatever, who are on the quest to sort of reimagine themselves in this rebuilding phase that we're all in?
And when you put your hands horizontally, you're talking about into the community, the concentric circles of who's closest, who's there. And I'm doing my hands in concentric circles.
I'm talking about that too, but also about sort of the depth of what our choral organizations mean. Not because this section that we're talking about here is all about numbers, but one of the skews that about numbers that we argue is that it's not about big numbers. It's not, the size of the number doesn't really matter. It's what you're doing with your numbers that matter. And so in this rebuilding phase,
Right.
where are the metrics for us as we are in this rebuilding stage in life?
Isn't that's a question I need to think about a little bit. I see what you're saying about numbers. I kind of keep going back to this, is looking for the links beyond, or how the music, how the nature of the art, the media that you work in, the clay that choruses work in and music educators work in when they're working with a group of singers. It's the medium and the message, right? And thinking about both of those things, and then looking at what are the natural links to those things. So for me, a chorus, let's say that 50, you usually have a chorus of 100. 50, you now have a 50 for whatever reason, you're rebuilding. Choruses show up. When you think about the big events in a school, or you think about the events in a community, the good times and the bad times, the worst times, choruses show up. They happen. They're there. Whether you organized it or not, they sing. And and people rally around that, right? Mm-hmm. So look at the microcosm of where you are. When you think about, so I'm thinking a lot because I know both of you are music educators. When you think about a music educator, schools have been through hell and back, right? And they still are. Parents are not agreeing, administrators and boards are not agreeing on what's going on. So there's a lot of stress and strain. In the olden days, the chorus would sing at important events for the school.
Yeah.
Right?
The no-brainer.
No-brainer. Choruses are there. They're the spirit of the school. They're part of the spirit of the school. They're part of what's been going on. They're brought into communities at the same as well, right? And the good times and the bad. They're in the parades. But they're also in, oh my God, there was a fire, there was a shooting, there was a flood, they're there. And I think when you think about, those are kind of extremes maybe, but when you think about where your chorus naturally hooks into elements of your environment, of your community, it helps with the depth, I think, and then the numbers will start back. We'll start getting the numbers back to where they were. But it's important, right? But you've got to really communicate that. It's not just about, we sing really well in 4 parts, and we do, we sing a cappella. That's not enough, right? So it's kind of important to think that way, and that's not hard, given how we see choruses that way, right? It just takes a little bit like, oh. And let me say one more thing about this. When I have done fundraising workshops in the past for chorus administrators, because just again, especially in the early 2000s when I started at Chorus America, choruses were like, please, how do we raise money? And one of the push and pulls is that you're there because they love what they're singing. The choristers love what they're singing. But if you're trying to go to a community to get more support, you've got to face the fact that it's not about what you're singing so much, right? All the time. I mean, yes, there are people who grew up on choral music and they get it, but there are a lot of people who don't. And the further afield you go from your core audience into that next concentric circle and the next concentric circle of who's related to who, and then you getting into public support, you really you got to do the work to think this way, or else it causes so much internal strife, because everybody's around the shoulds. We should be getting support because we sing really well and we sing great stuff, and they don't understand why, and then the boards get upset and the artistic director is questioned, and because nobody's done the work to see who should care about you and why. Right.
That right there. Do the work.
It's like the perfect wrap-up.
It is. That is perfect. You've given us so much. You've given us examples and blueprints that we can replicate on any possible scale in front of us. And you've reminded us that we all love music, but we can't trust everything in the music. We have to look for the links. And as you just said, we have to do the work. Is there anything else that super matters that you want to say to our listener before we sign off on this one?
Oh my goodness. Okay, wait, let me check. Let me check, make sure. One thing I wanted to say, I meant to say about the impact study that isn't sort of all about the impact study, but it kind of goes back to why it matters to think about these other connections. And this is a big example of this. With COVID and everything that happened with the Skagit Choral, that put us on the poster children for viral spread category. One of the things that happened was Skagit was fantastic and shared everything that happened to them and actually helped bolster research. They were fantastic. But the other thing that happened was that reporters needed data to do their articles about the impact of the COVID pandemic on the choral field and on church choirs. If it wasn't about the field in a broader sense, it was about church and singing in church. And they came to us for the data about why anybody should care about this, right? And in part, they came to us. They also talked to lots of sources, but we were so thrilled to be able to have data so that the reporters could write their story for the larger public. And especially at such a critical time where we had to be able to show the importance of the field and why what happened with the Skagit Choral really matters. And it really matters, for everybody to heal and come back and be super careful with public health. And but that wouldn't have happened as much. We were quoted in so many newspapers, and the choral field was talked about in so many more articles than we had ever seen before. And so it was just sort of an example of how when you can make it about something bigger than yourself, that it has ripple effects that you can't even imagine. So, okay, So I'm done.
That was perfect. Oh my goodness. Thank you so much for being with us today, Catherine. This has been such a joy to speak with you.
Oh, well, thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
What an incredible conversation with Catherine Dehoney, CEO of Chorus America. You know, perhaps some of you listening knew about Chorus America before this conversation, but hopefully you know a lot more about what it is now. It is such an incredible professional organization for choir directors and choir leaders to learn, especially with their focus areas, on how important it is for us to be able to justify our worth as choral organizations, not just within our own circles, but so much wider than that.
I love how Catherine was able to provide us with examples that we can scale to our current situations. She did that with the words we use and how we describe what we're doing, in the links that we're making, in the data that we're collecting to tell the stories. But I really loved how she said, we trust too much in the music, and instead we have to do the work and put in the time to look for the links, and then we can tell the story.
Yeah, it's so funny. The minute that you sort of flip your mindset, when you sort of take that music out for a hot second, and just see what's happening around you, the links, the connections, the people who are in your circle who are already there, ready to support you. It feels like a no-brainer. But for some reason, when we hold so tightly to that music element for so long, if we're not able to let that go even for a second, we can miss some really great opportunities to grow.
Like she said, it's not necessarily hard, but it just has to be done, and you have to take the time to do it. And that might just mean you're taking a pause and letting go of the death grip. I love it. Yes. I can't wait to see this Rediscovering Harmony campaign.
I know.
Watch out, world.
Such an incredible tool, because the groups that put that together, I know, are top-notch individuals, and I'm so glad it's going to be adaptable to so many people. I think that's a really great message that we as choir directors can send right now to our singers and our communities. I can't wait to see it.
I can't either. You know, this is the third and final of our pre-release book tour as of right now. I'm sure we're going to have more pre-release book episodes, but if you are interested in being up to date on what's going on, you can join us over at patreon.com/musicedmatters. Everything over there goes to support the show, and maybe if there's enough interest, Alex and I can do a live Q&A for the patrons over at Patreon.
Absolutely.
But we're about to go underneath a rock and edit our socks off. So we will see you on the other side, and we'll keep you posted when the executive's guide to choir.
We need a better title. The more I say it on this, I'm like, oh, it's such a boring title. If y'all have any suggestions, just let us know.
Yeah, we'd love ideas. Title writing is worse than the book writing. Anyway, thank you for coming along on this journey with us. I hope you know that whatever you're doing today, you matter. We all know that music matters, especially how we communicate value and share and tell our stories. And we'll see you next time on the Music Ed Matters podcast.